Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment when a woman becomes so powerful, so grounded, and so quietly untouchable that a man doesn't just notice her, he feels her absence in his bones. Not because she's loud, not because she's trying to prove anything, but because her silent moves speak louder than any words ever could. When she stops chasing, when she protects her peace, when she walks with a confidence that doesn't beg, negotiate, or explain, something shifts. And suddenly, the same men who once took her for granted can't stop thinking about her. Tonight, I'm about to reveal the silent moves that make men lose their minds. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that her silence holds more power than any explanation she could ever give. Not because she is withholding, not because she is playing games, but because she finally understands that her value is expressed most clearly through her actions, through her standards, and through the way she carries herself without needing permission, validation, or applause. And that is where these silent moves begin to create a shift inside a man's mind, because they reveal a woman who knows who she is even when no one is watching. One of those quiet moves is the way you choose peace over chaos. You don't fight every battle. You don't respond to every provocation. You don't rush to defend yourself against every misunderstanding. You let your calm speak for you. A man cannot stand the thought of losing a woman who has mastered her peace, because her absence feels like the sudden removal of gravity. Everything becomes unsteady without her. Another move is when you stop repeating yourself. You don't beg a man to change. You don't ask him again and again to show up differently. You say it once, clearly, confidently, and then you let your actions align with your words. When he sees that you are willing to walk away from your own desires rather than shrink your standards, something inside him wakes up. Desire grows where respect is present, and respect grows where boundaries are upheld. Then there is the move of focusing on your purpose, not as a tactic, but as a lifestyle. When you start prioritizing your growth, your passions, your energy, your life becomes a force that pulls people in rather than chasing after them. Men are drawn to women who have something meaningful they are building, because that kind of woman cannot be possessed. She can only be chosen, and she only chooses those who rise to meet her. There's also the silence of self-respect. The moment you stop entertaining behaviors that contradict your worth is the moment a man begins to realize he either needs to step up or step out. You don't have to shout. You don't have to make a dramatic exit. You simply choose yourself quietly, consistently, and confidently. And that quiet choice echoes louder in his mind than any argument ever could. Another silent move is when you give space instead of pressure, not because you're afraid, but because you understand that genuine connection needs room to grow. You allow him time to think, time to reflect, time to feel your absence, and recognize what life is like without your presence filling the room with warmth. Your silence becomes a mirror. And what he sees in that mirror determines the man he wants to become. There's the move of controlling your reactions. Not everything deserves your panic, your tears, or your anger. You respond slowly, intentionally. You give yourself time to understand your emotions before you deliver them. This kind of composure makes a man rethink his approach because it communicates a level of maturity and emotional intelligence that demands respect. When you aren't easily shaken, he becomes more mindful of what he brings into your life. Another powerful silent move is focusing on your appearance, not for him, but for yourself. When you begin taking care of your body, your health, your confidence, your glow becomes undeniable. Men notice when a woman is leveling up, not because she's trying to impress anyone, but because she respects her own reflection. That shift in energy is magnetic. Your glow becomes his weakness. Then there is the move of saying less and observing more. Instead of explaining what you want, you watch how he behaves. You pay attention to his effort, his consistency, his intentions. You allow his actions to reveal the truth so you can make decisions rooted in clarity, not hope. That kind of quiet discernment is powerful. It shows that you are not led by fantasies, but by reality. And that makes him realize he cannot hide behind excuses. Another silent move is when you stop competing for a place in his life. You no longer fight to be chosen. You no longer compare yourself to other women. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's attention or lack of it. You stand tall, knowing that what is meant for you will enter your life with respect and stay with intention. A woman who doesn't fight for a spot in a man's world becomes the woman every man wants to fight for. And then there's the move of emotional independence. When your happiness no longer depends on a man's behavior, when you don't break every time he pulls away, when you don't crumble because he couldn't meet a need, he starts seeing you differently. He realizes you are whole, you are complete, you are someone he can enjoy but never control. That realization is both humbling and electrifying for a man because it forces him to approach you with admiration instead of entitlement. One of the most powerful silent moves a woman can make is disappearing when she's not valued. Not dramatically, not angrily, not with loud declarations, but with dignity. You simply remove yourself from spaces where you are not appreciated. You step back from conversations that exhaust you. You let go of connections that drain you. And you do all of it with grace. That move haunts a man because it shows him what life looks like when a woman who once gave him warmth decides she's done giving, where she receives nothing. There's also the quiet transformation that happens when you begin choosing your emotional well-being above your desire to be loved. You stop trying to save relationships that are sinking. You stop forcing connections that no longer feel aligned. You stop apologizing for wanting more. And in doing so, you create a version of yourself that is unshakably strong. A man loses his mind over a woman who refuses to lose herself. And one of the most powerful silent moves of all is when you stay mysterious, not by hiding, but by keeping parts of your life sacred. You don't share everything too soon. You don't reveal all your feelings at once. You allow him to earn deeper access to you. That gradual unveiling creates a sense of intrigue that drives men absolutely wild. Mystery is not about manipulation, it's about pacing. It's about giving someone the privilege of getting to know you slowly. Another silent move is raising your standards quietly. You don't announce it, you don't make speeches about what you want, you simply stop accepting anything less. When a man realizes that the behaviors that once worked no longer pass the threshold of your heart, he feels the shift instantly. It makes him step back and reevaluate who he needs to be. And finally, there's the silent move of being genuinely happy. When a woman radiates joy, peace, and fulfillment from within, she becomes unforgettable. Her energy stays on a man's mind long after she's left the room. She becomes the woman he thinks about at night. The woman he can't replace. The woman who sets the standard for everyone who comes after her. Because what truly makes a man lose his mind is not just the beauty he sees, but the internal world he can't fully access. It's the depth behind your eyes, the strength behind your silence, the stories he hasn't heard yet, and the layers he senses but hasn't earned the right to touch. When a woman has a life that is rich, full, and overflowing with purpose, she becomes the kind of presence that lingers in a man's thoughts long after she's walked away. And another silent move, one that shakes a man more than he'll ever admit, is when you stop over-investing. When you no longer give too much too soon. When you don't hand over your energy, attention, or affection without seeing whether he's offering anything of equal value. This shift is subtle, but it speaks volumes. Because men feel the difference immediately. They sense you're not clinging. They sense you're not desperate. They sense you're not living in fear of losing them. Instead, you're simply observing, allowing the connection to unfold naturally without fastening your identity to his presence. There is also the subtle power of patience. Not passive waiting, but powerful patience. The kind that allows you to let things unfold rather than forcing outcomes. Men grow uneasy around a woman who is patient in her standards, because she shows she's not in a rush to belong to someone who isn't sure about her. She's not trying to skip steps or jump into something flimsy. She's steady. She waits for alignment, not attention. And that steadiness creates an undeniable contrast to the chaos he may be used to. Another silent move that unravels a man's composure is how you handle disappointment. Instead of exploding, instead of questioning your worth, you take a deep breath, acknowledge what happened, and adjust your expectations accordingly. You don't punish him. You don't guilt trip him. You simply change how much access he gets to you. You shift quietly, gracefully, without cruelty. That emotional maturity is rare. It makes him reflect on his actions in ways loud reactions never could. A powerful and often underestimated move is when you invest in your emotional self-control. When you no longer chase reassurance, no longer panic when someone pulls away, no longer need constant validation to feel grounded. When you carry yourself with that kind of stability, a man starts to realize that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. He feels the difference between a woman who needs him and a woman who chooses him. And that difference shakes him to his core. Then there is the silent power of taking responsibility for your life. When you don't blame others for your circumstances, when you don't let anyone else dictate your happiness, when you build your world with intention, you show him that you are not waiting for someone to rescue you. You are your own foundation. You are your own source of strength. And that kind of woman becomes unforgettable because she is not dependent. She is complementary. She enhances a man's life, but she doesn't rely on him to create one. Another silent shift that deeply affects a man is when you stop returning to patterns that hurt you. When you finally close the door you used to leave cracked open. When you stop accepting half effort or inconsistent affection. When you choose your peace over his potential. The moment he realizes you are no longer available to be taken for granted is the moment he understands he may have underestimated the value of your presence. Nothing breaks a man's composure like realizing the woman he assumed would always be there has found enough strength to walk away. There's also the silent move of maintaining your curiosity about life. When you keep learning, exploring, reading, growing, when your mind stays active and your dreams stay alive, a woman who evolves is a woman who becomes increasingly magnetic because she refuses to remain the same version of herself year after year. Men notice when your soul grows, when your ideas deepen, when your confidence expands. They notice when you become more than you were yesterday. That evolution captivates them more than any physical attribute ever could. Another move that affects men profoundly is when you stop reacting to their inconsistency with desperation. When you respond to mixed signals with clarity, when you answer distance with distance, when you don't chase, don't beg, don't plead for answers, you simply allow people to show you who they are and act accordingly. That calm acceptance unnerves a man because he realizes he can't manipulate your emotions. He can't control your narrative. He can't pull you into his uncertainty. You are steady, grounded, and selective with your peace. Then there is the quiet transformation that happens when you stop apologizing for wanting what you want. When you no longer shrink your needs just to keep someone interested. When you no longer convince yourself that your standards are too high. When you stand firm and say, I want loyalty, consistency, respect, and effort. And you say it without hesitation, without fear of being judged. A woman who knows what she wants becomes a force a man can't ignore. She becomes a woman he either rises to meet or loses entirely. Another silent move is simply becoming unavailable to anything that drains you. When you stop participating in drama, stop entertaining confusion, stop feeding situations that leave you emotionally exhausted. You conserve your energy for things that nourish you. This shift changes everything because men can feel when a woman has upgraded her internal environment. They can feel when she no longer responds to chaos. They can feel when she has outgrown old dynamics. That kind of internal shift radiates outward and changes the entire tone of your interactions. There's also the subtle but powerful move of staying soft without being naive. When you maintain your kindness, your empathy, your warmth, but pair them with discernment. When you can give love without giving away your power. When you can care deeply without collapsing your boundaries. Men are not threatened by softness, they are threatened by softness combined with strength. Because that combination is rare, and once they experience it, they realize how much they stand to lose if they don't take care of it. Another move that quietly elevates your worth in a man's eyes is when you don't try to prove yourself. You don't explain why you're valuable. You don't compete with anyone. You don't try to convince him that you're the one. You let your presence speak for itself. You allow your energy, your character, your actions, your heart to be your proof. This quiet confidence is magnetic. It shows that you understand your worth without needing external confirmation. Then there is the silent move of adapting without bitterness. When something doesn't go your way, you don't collapse. You recalibrate. You shift your focus. You redirect your energy. You rebuild. That resilience is breathtaking. It makes a man see you not as someone who breaks easily, but as someone who becomes stronger with every challenge. A woman who can rebuild her own heart is a woman a man will never forget. Another silent move is becoming harder to access emotionally. Not closed off, just selective. You don't open your heart to anyone who hasn't earned the right to hold it. You don't reveal your vulnerabilities to people who haven't shown consistency. You share slowly, intentionally, with people who prove they are safe. This emotional gatekeeping creates a sense of rarity around you, and rarity is irresistible. And finally, one of the most powerful silent moves of all is when you embody self-love so deeply that it shows in everything you do, in how you speak to yourself, in how you treat your body, in how you make decisions, in how you walk into a room, in how you refuse to abandon yourself for anyone. This kind of self-love is not loud. It doesn't need to be. It is felt. It radiates. It changes the entire atmosphere around you. And it is the very thing that makes a man lose his mind. Not because he feels entitled to you, but because he knows he's witnessing something rare, something powerful, something beautiful, and he fears losing it more than he can ever admit. Because once a woman reaches that level of self-love, something else begins to unfold, something subtle, powerful, and impossible to ignore. She starts to move through the world with a quiet certainty that shifts the energy around her. She no longer questions her place in someone's life. She no longer wonders whether she's enough. She no longer waits for anyone to validate her. She becomes the validation. She becomes the peace. She becomes the presence that changes the way a man sees everything, including himself. And another silent move that shakes a man to his core is when you begin protecting your time like it's sacred. Not in a way that's harsh or dismissive, but in a way that shows you respect your life's rhythm. You don't drop everything for last-minute plans. You don't put your goals on hold because someone suddenly remembered your worth. You don't rearrange your world for someone who hasn't invested in it. This quiet prioritization makes a man realize that if he wants a place in your schedule, he must earn it because you are not living on standby waiting to be chosen. There is also the transformative move of creating emotional distance without creating emotional drama. When you feel someone pulling away, you don't chase after them. You don't interrogate. You don't panic. You simply adjust your energy to match theirs. You step back with composure. You let them feel the absence of your presence, the silence of your attention, the stillness of your affection. And in that space, a man begins to reflect in ways he never did before. He begins to consider what life feels like without your warmth holding him together. That quiet recalibration creates a shift no words ever could. Another silent move that deeply disrupts a man's assumptions is when you start saying no without guilt. No to disrespect. No to inconsistency. No to mixed signals. No to being an almost, a maybe, a backup plan. Your no becomes a boundary and a declaration of self-worth all at once. And because you deliver it calmly, firmly, and without hostility, it becomes impossible to argue with. Men notice when a woman's no becomes stronger than her desire to be liked. That strength is equal parts intimidating and intoxicating. There's also the silent power of not explaining your choices. When you make a decision, you leave, you stay, you pause, you step back. You don't give long speeches about why. You don't justify, you don't over-explain. You let your actions speak. You let your silence clarify. A woman who doesn't explain herself becomes a mystery. A man wants to decode. He begins to wonder what shaped her, what she values, what she refuses to tolerate. That observational curiosity grows into attraction, and that attraction grows into respect. Another move that makes men lose their composure is when you no longer respond to breadcrumbs. When you stop accepting half-effort messages, last-minute invitations, inconsistent behavior, or affection that fluctuates based on his mood. When he gives you the bare minimum, you don't reward it with enthusiasm, you meet it with neutrality. Not coldness, not punishment, just neutrality. Because you know your value isn't measured by the scraps you receive. That quiet neutrality becomes a mirror that shows him exactly where he stands, and it forces him to either rise or fall away. Then comes the subtle power of embracing your feminine energy fully, not as a strategy, but as your natural state. When you allow yourself to be soft, receptive, intuitive, expressive, you awaken something in a man that makes him feel grounded in his own masculine energy. This isn't about playing a role, it's about returning to yourself. Your softness isn't weakness, it's strength expressed elegantly. It's grace in motion. And when a man sees that you can be both strong and soft, independent and loving, powerful and peaceful, he realizes he has met someone rare. Another silent move that changes everything is when you let your standards filter people for you. Instead of scanning every man to see if he's good enough, you let your boundaries do the work. You stop explaining what kind of treatment you expect. You live it, you show it, you embody it. And whoever can match it stays. Whoever can't falls away naturally. This creates a sense of inevitability around your value. A man knows that if he doesn't treat you well, someone else will. Not because you threaten him, but because your energy makes it obvious. And then there's the quiet shift of not letting anyone disrupt your emotional baseline. You stop letting a man's attention determine your mood. You stop letting his inconsistency shake your confidence. You stop letting his silence make you doubt your worth. You maintain your inner balance regardless of what he does. This emotional stability is rare. Men feel it immediately. It makes them realize they cannot play with your heart the way they might have with others. Your inner peace becomes your power. Another silent move that affects a man deeply is when you invest in your life outside of him. Your friendships, your career, your hobbies, your health, your passions. When your happiness comes from multiple sources, he senses that you are not depending on him to fill your world. You are inviting him to complement it. This takes the pressure off the connection and replaces it with desire. A woman with a rich life becomes irresistible because she becomes someone he wants to be part of, not someone he feels responsible for. There is also the quiet power of emotional generosity given selectively. You're kind, yes. You're thoughtful, yes. You're supportive, yes. But you don't give all of that to everyone. You reserve your deep care for those who show they can hold it. This selectiveness creates a sense of privilege around your affection. A man begins to cherish every moment you open up because he knows it is not guaranteed. It is earned. And earned affection always carries more weight. Another silent move that impacts a man's heart is when you heal old wounds without making him responsible for them. When you face your patterns. When you learn from your past. When you stop projecting old pain onto new experiences. When you show him that you're aware of your scars, but you don't let them dictate your decisions. This emotional maturity is magnetic. It makes him feel safe with you. It makes him admire you. It makes him realize that you're not looking for a savior, you're looking for a partner. Then comes the subtle transformation of choosing peace over connection when the two are in conflict. When you refuse to abandon your inner stability for the sake of keeping someone in your life, when you're willing to let go rather than lose yourself, this is a silent move that resonates in a man's soul. He realizes he cannot be reckless with your heart. He realizes you value yourself too much to stay where you're not nurtured. That realization changes him, even if he never says it out loud. Another powerful silent move is when you treat yourself with the same tenderness you hope to receive. When you rest, when you're tired, when you speak gently to yourself, when you give yourself grace, when you honor your needs. This self-compassion radiates outward. It changes how you walk, how you talk, how you love. A man feels that softness and finds himself drawn to it because everyone is searching for someone who feels like calm after a storm. And perhaps one of the most impactful silent moves is when you stop romanticizing potential, when you stop falling in love with what someone could be and start paying attention to who they actually are. When you no longer build fantasies in your mind, you begin to see reality clearly. And from that clarity comes power. From that power comes confidence. And from that confidence comes a magnetic force that pulls the right man toward you effortlessly.